has acquired Irish pub chain O'Hagan's. Eleni managed to catch up with Kevin Hedderwick, the CEO of the group.
We have always said is that, when we get into a category, we want to be leaders in that category. And we recently, as you say, embarked on entering into the restaurant and pub business via Keg and McGinty's. And the opportunity came along to literally double our size by virtue of an acquisition of the brand O'Hagan's, which under normal circumstances would probably take us about 5 years if we grew the network at 5 new restaurants a year. And at a very generous entry-level price, which unlocks value for shareholders, we've been able to do that within a matter of months.
Well, just looking at your acquisition, looking at the pub and restaurant space at this point in time, and the fact that you are pointing towards a strategy in the quick service restaurants and casual dining space, some would argue that perhaps you're going to start gaining monopoly in this area, given the fact that you've got O'Hagan's, as I mentioned, the Keg and McGinty's as well. How do you plan to juggle all these three brands going forward?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think that, it's going to be awfully difficult to balance three brands that are very similar in terms of offering. But what we've always said from the outset is that we are attracted by the category, which is restaurant and pubs. We think that a business like Keg has got great equity amongst consumers. So certainly Keg, you can tick that box. It'll be the flagship brand in our certain portfolio. But what we do sit with now is an estate of 54 franchise pub and restaurants. We've got some very ambitious plans for the category. I think that the category literally needs to be taken by the scruff of its neck and reinvented. It's been allowed to erode over the years. And the nice thing now is that we sit in a situation where we say, well, we've got 54 pub and restaurant outlets. How do we cut and dice this so that we can make sure that, we get to consumers in every possible way that we want to? So it is really a question of saying, how do you match these brands to the consumers that you want to talk to? But in March next year, we'll be unveiling a brand new look and feel for the Keg brand, and also at the same time unveiling a very, I would say, ambitious strategy for the pub and restaurant category in South Africa per se.
Kevin, you said that the Keg is very well known, and of course it is a well-known brand in South Africa. Which would you say of the three are the weakest brand at this point in time, given the fact that McGinty's, although very popular a few years ago, has started to deteriorate, given the fact that we haven't seen the right maintenance occurring in many of its branches?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about it. I mean, in terms of sheer numbers, the McGinty's has got to be the stepchild of the business. I think it represents only 5 outlets, although they all trade very well. So if you spoke simply in terms of consumer equity, McGinty's has probably got the least, but it's also the one that's represented less in terms of network. So it's not surprising that its consumer equity is lower than the other two.
Kevin, also looking at the trend that's been occurring in South Africa, of course, they have lost popularity over the last few years. Of course, it is part of your strategy for the revival of this sector of the economy. We saw the revival coming through in the European market as well. Do you think it's going to be a successful strategy here in South Africa, given the fact that consumer needs are changing dramatically?
Well, I think you've summarized it well. I think the fact that consumer needs have changed so rapidly, with respect to the previous owners of these brands, I don't think that they've evolved as rapidly as the consumer has. So the consumer, to be quite frank with you, is just bored with the restaurant and pub category in terms of the branded offerings that are out there. And that's why I said earlier on, our view of this particular category is to take it literally by the scruff of its neck and reinvent it, as we see has happened in the UK and Europe, where the shift has been far more back towards food as the offering, not around alcohol. In the UK, they talk about gastropubs. We don't want to talk gastropubs in the South African connotation because it could have some negative consequences. But does the category need reinventing? Absolutely. Can we do it? I have no doubt about it.
What kind of growth are you expecting in this business, Kevin? We've also seen you acquire various chicken offerings because you are starting to increase your brand extensively. What is going to be your focal point going forward? Is this going to be a key growth area for you?
You mean the pub and restaurant category?
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I think that one of the things that we do in this business, which is a little different, is that this business is structured along the lines of brand stewardship. So I'm not getting stressed about the fact that, can I balance off what needs to be done in chicken versus what needs to be done in wimpy versus what needs to be done in the pub and restaurant category. Every one of these businesses has an appointed brand champion who eats, sleeps, and drinks in very narrow trenches. We don't duplicate typical corporate back-of-house functions like finance, IT, and human resources. But, these people are literally see each other as competitors. So there's, the ability for us to take on new brands depends on our ability to develop skills. And, we've got a great team here. They're young, they're energetic, they're ambitious. And so there's no chance that we're going to get distracted by the fact that we might be taking on this plethora of brands.
What about a Southern African footprint? We know that some of these pubs are present in other Southern African countries. Do you plan to expand further in other regions?
I certainly, from the pub and restaurant category, I think it's going to be difficult. I think that, outside of South Africa, there is perhaps a market for these type of things where you've got a high degree of expats in places like Kenya, for argument's sake, which is a good example, and probably Zambia and Zimbabwe, and I think Mauritius, certainly there's some chance. But the bigger African footprint, I think, is going to be tough. But South Africa is what holds promise for us as a company and the categories in which we compete. If you think about what's happening, and, here we've been working very closely with my ex-colleagues in SA Breweries, the potential to do something clever, and that's probably what we want to talk to the market about in March, with the pub category in South Africa per se, and also talking to the black market in terms of townships, is significant. So why would we want to go off expending energy outside of South Africa when there's so much promise lying on our doorstep here?